The luxurious Aram Watch Boutique stood as a temple of exclusivity, catering only to the elite. Its interior, adorned with marble floors and golden accents, radiated wealth. Behind its pristine glass cases, the world's most expensive timepieces rested on velvet cushions, awaiting buyers who could afford their price tags. Among the sharply dressed customers and polished staff, an older man entered, dressed in a worn-out leather jacket, faded jeans, and a dusty cowboy hat. His gait was slow but steady, his presence calm yet commanding. However, his attire immediately set him apart. He didn't look like the usual clientele. A young salesman. Ethan, in a tailored black suit, noticed the newcomer. He eyed the man from head to toe and suppressed a smirk. With a subtle shake of his head, he turned to his colleague and whispered, "Looks like we have another window shopper." Ignoring the murmurs, the older man approached a display case, his sharp blue eyes settling on a rare, limited edition Swiss timepiece. He tilted his hat back slightly and murmured, "That's a fine piece right there." Ethan sighed dramatically, stepping forward with mocking politeness. "Sir, can I help you?" The hesitation in his voice revealed his true thoughts. He didn't believe this man belonged here. The stranger nodded. "I'd like to know more about this watch." Ethan chuckled, his tone dripping with condescension. "Sir, that particular watch is a one-of-a-kind collector's item. 350,000 to you. Perhaps I can show you something more suitable?" The stranger met Ethan's gaze, calm and unbothered. "I'd still like to hear about it." Little did Ethan know, he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. Chapter 2. The disrespect begins. Ethan folded his arms, barely hiding his amusement. The way this old man spoke, so calm, so certain, was almost entertaining. Didn't he realize he was completely out of place in a store like this? With a forced smile, Ethan pointed at the 350,000 Swiss masterpiece inside the glass case. "Sir, this watch is crafted from 18-karat white gold with diamond inlays and a Swiss automatic movement. It's a collector's item designed for serious buyers." The stranger gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. "And what makes it special?" Ethan barely contained a laugh. This man really thought he could just waltz in and discuss a luxury timepiece, like he could actually afford. He decided to put an end to this little game. "Look, sir," Ethan said, lowering his voice slightly. "This isn't just a watch. It's a status symbol. It's for people who—" He paused deliberately, glancing at the man's worn-out leather jacket. "Fit the lifestyle. Do you understand what I mean?" The stranger remained still, his piercing blue eyes locked onto Ethan, revealing no anger, no offense, just quiet confidence. "I see," the man said finally. "So you think I don't fit the lifestyle?" Ethan let out a short, sarcastic chuckle. "Sir, with all due respect, this watch costs more than most people's homes. I don't want to waste your time or mine." The store grew quieter. Other customers were beginning to notice the interaction, some watching Cal with curiosity, others with discomfort. The stranger exhaled slowly, adjusting his cowboy hat. "Interesting," he muttered. What Ethan failed to realize was that the man standing before him was none other than Clint Eastwood, a living legend. And soon, the one entire store was about to find out. Ethan felt a surge of satisfaction as he saw the older man take a step back. To him, this was just another case of a wannabe customer who had no business being here. "I'll tell you what," Ethan said, grinning smugly. "Why don't I show you something from our more, accessible collection?" He gestured toward a nearby section where the store kept watches that, while still expensive, weren't exactly high-status defining. The stranger didn't flinch. Instead, he studied Ethan carefully, as if deciding something. Then, in a voice as steady as ever, he said, "I didn't ask for something cheaper. I asked about that watch." Ethan rolled his eyes, slightly, now feeling annoyed. "Sir, I really don't mean to be rude. But these watches are meant for quiet, serious collectors. You have to understand that this isn't just something you buy on impulse. It's an investment. The man raised an eyebrow, amused. An investment, huh? Ethan nodded quickly, eager to end the conversation. Exactly. Our clientele are people who appreciate the craftsmanship, the heritage, and, of course, they have the means to... He stopped mid-sentence. The stranger had taken a slow step forward, his presence somehow more commanding than before. Son, the man said, his voice low and firm. I've been collecting watches longer than you've been alive, Ethan. Froze. The air in the store shifted. The confidence in the man's tone wasn't forced, it was absolute. A few customers who had been pretending not to listen exchanged glances. A couple near the counter suddenly looked at the man with wide eyes, as if recognizing something Ethan hadn't, but Ethan, still blinded by his own arrogance, shrugged. Well, he said with a smirk, collecting and buying are two different things, aren't they? The saddening silence in the store was deafening, and in the next few moments Ethan was about to realize the gravity of his mistake as the air in the store grew thick with tension. A soft murmur rippled through the customers. A woman near the entrance gasped quietly, nudging her husband. Wait a second, she whispered. That's Clint Eastwood. Her husband's eyes widened in disbelief. Are you serious? Another customer, a younger man, likely in his 30s, turned sharply, his gaze locking onto the older man in the cowboy hat. Recognition dawned on his face. Oh my God, he breathed. That's really him. The whisper spread like wildfire through the store. One by one, heads turned, eyes widened, and jaws dropped. Ethan, still unaware, continued his condescending act. Sir, like I said, this store caters to a very specific clientele. But he never finished the sentence. A middle-aged customer standing nearby finally spoke up, loud enough for everyone to hear. Dude, he said, staring at Ethan in disbelief. That's Clint freaking Eastwood. Ethan's smug grin vanished in an instant. His eyebrows shot up, his face turned pale, and a sudden wave of panic coursed through him. He blinked, looking at the man in front of him as if seeing him for the first time. What? He croaked. Another customer confirmed it. Yeah, the actor, director, legend. You know, the guy who has more money than this entire store is worth? The store fell into absolute silence. Ethan's stomach twisted into a knot. His throat went dry. The realization hit him like a freight train. He had just humiliated Clint Eastwood, and every single person in the store had witnessed it. Ethan's heart pounded miles in his chest. He swallowed hard, his smugness replaced by sheer panic. Clint Eastwood. The Clint Eastwood. The man who had just been calmly asking about a watch, the man Ethan had mocked, dismissed, and belittled, was one of the biggest legends in Hollywood history. Customers were now murmuring among themselves, their faces a mix of shock, amusement, and disbelief. Some had even pulled out their phones, ready to capture the unfolding disaster. Ethan's manager, Mr. Collins, had finally noticed the commotion. A tall, polished man in his 50s, he strode over, his expression darkening, as he realized what was happening. Ethan, Collins hissed under his breath. What the hell is going on? Ethan stammered, his face red with embarrassment. I didn't know. But before he could finish, Clint Eastwood finally spoke again. His voice was calm, deliberate, but now carried an unmistakable edge of authority. So, Clint said, adjusting his cowboy hat, now that you know my name, am I suddenly worthy of hearing about this watch? Ethan felt sweat bead on his forehead. The entire store fell silent, waiting for his answer. The young salesman opened his mouth, desperate to backtrack. But before he could, the manager stepped in, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Mr. Eastwood," Collins said smoothly, his expression full of forced politeness. "I deeply apologize and for this unfortunate misunderstanding. Please, allow me to personally assist you." Ethan felt his stomach drop. His manager had taken over. That meant only one thing. His job was now hanging by a thread, but Clint simply shook his head. "No need," he said casually. Then he turned his piercing gaze back to Ethan. "I wanted to see how you'd treat a customer," Clint said, his voice low but in a powerful L. "And I did." Ethan felt like the floor had been ripped from under him, because the next words Clint spoke sealed his fate forever. The air in the store felt heavier than ever. Every customer, every employee, even the manager stood frozen, waiting for Clint Eastwood's next words. The legendary actor tilted his head slightly, studying Ethan with those sharp, unforgiving eyes. "You measured me by my clothes," Clint said, his voice calm yet cutting. "Not by my character." Ethan felt his throat tighten. Clint let the words sink in before continuing. "And that tells me everything I need to know about you." The entire store remained silent, the weight of the words hitting like a bullet. Ethan wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain. But what could he say? He had judged Clint Eastwood, a man worth hundreds of millions, a man who had shaped cinema itself, as if he were just another window shopper. Clint let out a slow breath. "I've met a lot of people in my lifetime, some good, some bad." He took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough for Ethan to hear. "But the worst? They're the ones who think they're better than everyone else." Ethan's face burned with shame. The manager, Mr. Collins, looked like he was barely containing his fury. He turned to Clint, his voice desperate. "Mr. Eastwood, please, if there's anything we can do to make this right." Clint simply shook his head. "You don't fix this by throwing 8 apologies and discounts bonds at it." He stepped back, adjusting his hat. "You fix it by hiring a better people." The words hit like a hammer. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the customers. Someone even whistled under their breath. Ethan felt his knees go weak. He knew, without a doubt, that he had just ruined his entire career in a matter of minutes. But the moment wasn't over yet, because Clint Eastwood was about to do something that would leave everyone in the store speechless. The tension in the store was suffocating. Ethan stood frozen, his face pale, his hands clammy. He knew his career was hanging by a thread, but there was nothing he could do to fix it. Clint Eastwood remained calm. Unfazed, his piercing blue eyes still locked on Ethan. Then, with the smoothest motion, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and unassuming, a black leather wallet. The store watched in silence as Clint casually flipped it open, revealing a sleek black credit card, one that only the ultra-wealthy carried. The kind that had no spending limit. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Clint took his time, then tapped the glass display right on the $350,000 watch that Ethan had refused to show him earlier. "I'll take it," he said, flatly. A collective gasp rippled through the store. Ethan's jaw nearly hit the floor. Even Mr. Collins, the manager, blinked in shock, before scrambling into action. "Of course, Mr. Eastwood. Right away, sir." He frantically motioned for another employee to retrieve the watch. Ethan could do nothing but stand there, humiliated, while the transaction took place, right in front of him. In under a minute, Clint Eastwood had effortlessly purchased a $350,000 timepiece, the same one Ethan had refused to show him. But Clint wasn't finished yet. As the staff carefully handed him the luxury watch, Clint turned back to Ethan, one last time. And then, he did something no one expected. He pushed the watch back across the counter, Ethan stared at it, confused. See, sir? Clint smirked, his expression unreadable. I don't want it. Another wave of silence, come a cry, crashed over the store. Ethan's breath, caught in his throat. But you just bought it. Clint nodded. That's right. He took a step back, adjusted his hat, and said in his signature slow, gravelly tone, I just wanted to prove a point. Ethan felt the quater blood drain from his face. Clint turned toward the exit, walking away, without another word. And just like that, the legend left the store, leaving behind a stunned crowd, a silent manager, and a salesman who would never forget this moment for the rest of his life. The moment Clint Eastwood walked out of the store, it was as if the Urier had been sucked out of the room. No one moved, no one spoke. It was just pure, deafening silence. Ethan stood like a statue, his face drained of all color, his stomach twisting into knots. A man who had just dropped 350,000 mar on a watch had left it behind, like it was nothing. Not because he couldn't afford it, not because he changed his mind, but because he wanted to teach a lesson. And Ethan knew, without a doubt, that he was the one who had just been taught. The customers, still reeling from what they had witnessed, started murmuring. Some shook their heads, others chuckled in disbelief. One man near the counter let out a low whistle. Damn, he muttered. That was some cold-blooded revenge. The Sadia manager, Mr. Collins, took a deep, heavy breath. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists. He slowly turned to Ethan, his eyes filled with pure disappointment. You, he said, his voice dangerously low. My office. Now. Ethan's heart dropped into his stomach. This wasn't just about a bad sales anymore. This wasn't just about one rude interaction. This was about the store's reputation. And Ethan had just single-handedly destroyed it, in front of a Hollywood icon. With shaking legs, he turned and followed his manager toward the back office, feeling the judgmental stares of every single person in the store, piercing through him like daggers. He knew what was coming, and he knew there was no way to escape it. Because Clint Eastwood hadn't just left behind a watch. He had left behind a lesson Ethan would never forget. Ethan walked into the manager's office, his legs heavy as stone. He knew he had messed up, badly, but the reality of what had just happened was only now sinking in. Mr. Collins shut the door firmly, then turned to face Ethan. His expression was a mix of rage, disappointment, and disbelief. Do you have any idea, he said slowly, his voice dangerously low, what you've just done? Ethan swallowed hard, but didn't dare speak. You didn't just insult a customer, Collins continued, stepping closer. You humiliated Clint Eastwood, a global icon, a billionaire, and for God's sake, and you did it in front of a store full of customers. Ethan winced. Hearing it out loud made it even worse. Collins rubbed his temples, trying to contain his anger. This is going to be all over the news. Do you understand that? Social media, blogs, articles. Luxury brands will see this. Our store's reputation is now at risk because of you. Ethan tried to stammer a response. I didn't know it was him. If I had... Collins slammed his hand on the desk, making Ethan jump. That's the problem, Ethan. You shouldn't have to know. You should treat every customer with the same respect, whether they look like a millionaire or not. Ethan lowered his gaze, his shame crushing him. I should fire you on the spot, Collins said coldly. Ethan's breath hitched. Frankly, I don't even want you working here anymore, the manager continued. But I have to think about how this looks publicly. If I fire you now, it makes the store look even worse, like we're just trying to clean up the mess. Ethan felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could still salvage this. I'm putting you on suspension, Collins said. Indefinitely, until we can figure out what to do next. The spark of hope immediately died. Leave your ID badge on the desk, Collins ordered. You're done for today. Ethan hesitated, but He knew there was no arguing. Slowly, he unclipped his name badge, placed it on the desk, and turned toward the door. As he reached for the handle, Collins spoke one last time. "And Ethan?" Ethan turned back, his expression hollow. "I hope you learned something today." Ethan gave a small, lifeless nod. Then, without another word, he stepped out of the office. The whispers, the stares from the other employees. He felt it all as he walked through the store for what might be the last time. And as he pushed open the glass doors and stepped into the busy street, one thought repeated over and over in his mind. Clint Eastwood didn't just cost me my job, he changed my life. Ethan stepped out into the cold evening air, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like a boulder. The luxurious store behind him, the place he had once felt so confident in, now felt like a graveyard of his own mistakes. He shoved his hands into his pockets and started walking, his mind racing. How had he been so blind? How had he let his ego and assumptions ruin what could have been a simple customer interaction? As he walked aimlessly, the sounds of the bustling city felt distant. He kept replaying the moment Clint Eastwood had pushed back the $350,000 watch, proving that he wasn't there to buy, he was there to teach, and Ethan had been the lesson. For the first time in his career, Ethan realized luxury wasn't just about wealth, it was about respect. He had spent years thinking that a person's worth was tied to their appearance, that money and status were the only things that mattered. But in less than 10 minutes, Clint Eastwood had destroyed that illusion. Months later, Ethan sat behind the counter of a small watch boutique. Far from the glittering world of high-end luxury, gone were the gold-trimmed display cases and velvet cushions. Here, things were simple, authentic. A customer walked in, an older man wearing a faded sweater and scuffed shoes. Ethan stood up, this time with a genuine smile. "Welcome," he said, his voice warmer, more honest than it had ever been. "How can I help you today?" The old man glanced around, then pointed at a modestly priced vintage timepiece he had in the glass case. "That's a fine watch," Ethan said, his tone full of respect and sincerity. "Would you like to hear more about it?" The man nodded, and this time Ethan didn't hesitate. He had finally learned the lesson Clint Eastwood had tried to teach him. True luxury isn't in the price tag, it's in how you treat people. The end. Final message. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and share. Let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Clint Eastwood's place? This final chapter brings closure, redemption, and a powerful message about our respect, humility, and growth, ensuring the audience leaves with a lasting impression.